we've got a little over 10 minutes left. We're going to move to a panel discussion. We've been monitoring some of the questions coming in, and I'm going to pose and direct them to our panel members. So firstly, Zimkita, if I could go to you. How does one deal with imposter syndrome that stands in the way of women achieving their best ambitions?
Clive, I'm going to give the same answer as my solution. We need to invest. I mean, when I talk to young people around the imposter syndrome, I always say to them, it's important for you to make sure that you've invested in your own talents. You have to find out what is it that is making you feel like you don't belong, because that's what the issue is. We feel like we don't belong in those spaces. Is it a matter of you can't speak in meetings? If that's the case, you actually spend time over the weekends and practice. You practice speaking, you listen to podcasts when you go to work, you do practical things so that you actually are ready, and you invest, you take control of your own career and invest in your career. And the people who actually have come to me and asked me these questions around imposter syndrome, they come back to me and say, I didn't know that everything was in my hands. So if your issue is an IFRS statement you don't understand, you go on Google and you Google the statement and you listen to the podcast when you go to work. And when you come back from work, you listen to the podcast. What are the key issues? And then you practice presenting that to the client. You practice, and practice. Everything we need for our success is in our hands. I am proof of that, right? Everything you need in order to succeed is available to you. You have to go and get it. And that is what I always say, because the moment you rely on other people, then you're giving them power over you. The first thing you must always do, invest in your success. That is the best investment you can ever make.
Thanks, Anvita. I was actually just recalling a personal experience of mine. I remember going to a women's business club event here in Zurich, where I live. There was about 100 women, and I was the only male. And what impressed me the most was the number of women who approached me to make me feel comfortable in that environment. And frankly, I don't think in an all-male environment, there's many men who would approach the single woman in that meeting to make her feel comfortable. So food for thought. It was a very positive experience for me. So looking at the questions again that are coming in, I'm going to go to Ainsley now. Ainsley, how do we break the perception that women who succeed in the corporate space must give up their family life for the career, which in contrast, men don't have this challenge. Men can do both.
Well, it's a good question, Clive. I mean, this sense of obligation that you can only have a career at the expense of your family life, well, I think it's a myth, to be honest. To that point about taking control of your own destiny, if you let it, if you work those ridiculous hours, if you don't put your own boundaries around you, then yes, it will be at the expense of your family life, for men or for women. But, it does seem to be a traditional stereotype of women being at home or men go out to work at the breadwinner. And that's the stereotype we really need to smash and to get rid of. And the effect of it's crippling because for women in particular, because it creates this kind of terrible scenario where you feel like you're choosing between children and your careers, and it creates this intense kind of guilt and this, I guess, stigma as well, that women who do have successful careers are somehow cold or uncaring, which couldn't be further from the truth. And in my own personal lived experience and observations working with some incredible women who are also mothers. And the stereotypes generally, they're just unfair for everyone. They're unfair for men, unfair for women. Because if you look at the flip side, for example, it relies on a view that, men are not able to parent well, which is really a terrible myth as well. So it speaks exactly to that point that I was saying earlier about encouraging more men to feel more confident about being a hands-on parent. And when we have more men stepping confidently into their role as a caregiver, and then they do it in a way that's loud and proud at work, so other men can see it and they role model it, then other particularly young junior men can see it's okay for them to do the same when they have children. And that will then break down those myths and those stereotypes that hold back women, but also men back from their families. And then finally, I'd say kind of as senior leaders, male and women, we should not hide our family commitments. So be open that you're going to a sports carnival. I always am. I'm very open with my team, the people around me, the people on my floor, very proudly say I'm going to a sports carnival, or I'm going to watch Prize Day, or I need to work from home because my child is sick that day. And I also try very hard not to normalize working hard. I often quote, I think it was President Eisenhower, who very strictly worked strict 8-hour days. He was very conscious of his time that he spent. And he was very strong about the fact that as a human being, he needed to have as much time to do his exercise, to be with his family, and that giving a full 8 hours a day where you're fully present to the, to the US, to the country, was sufficient. And of course, there's always times where you have urgent matters and things like that. But I try and remember that for myself as well, that 8 hours a day is a significant amount of time to invest in your work. So don't normalize 12, 14-hour days. It's really just simply not necessary. And of course, also manage those cycles so that when you do have a time where you do have an urgent matter, or you've got, it's audit period, for example, where we all know that is a tough time, then also normalize the lulls. So take advantage of the lulls that you have in the cyclical nature of your work, and be vocal about what you're doing with that time, i.e. that you're investing it with your family, that you're actually administering self-care, going for a massage, going for a run, going for a walk, being out in the sunshine, whatever it might be. Because I really do believe the more vocal you are about that, then, the more a successful career will seem not to be at the detriment of having a great family life. Thanks, Clive.
Thanks, Ainsley. I'm conscious that we've got more questions than time, so I'm trying to work my way through this. Maybe a question for Sarah. I'm conscious that her internet might not hold up, in which case I'd ask Roseanne to step in. But Sarah, question came in: how do you ask for a pay rise when you know you're about to go off on maternity leave, even though you know you're underpaid compared to the market?
That's almost an impossible question to answer, I think. I'm not somebody who can give kind of coaching advice, but I think if I listen to what the research said, and if I listen to the stories that were told to us, there were people that had conversations with their superiors about their responsibilities and their roles and what their level of remuneration would be coming back. And there were ways in which they had those conversations where they were able to work towards increasing their remuneration in order to allow them to be able to drop their hours slightly. So I don't know how do you approach that conversation? Maybe you talk about the responsibilities that you have. Maybe you talk about the commitment and what you've achieved and what you can bring to the career when you come back, and how that will help to give you a focus and stuff like that. I think it's just, it's an individual conversation, but what it boils down to is what came out top of the poll, or top of the study: supportive line managers. You need a line manager who recognizes your value, recognizes your contribution, and enables you to facilitate going on maternity leave, going on parental leave, but still being able to think about your career and what that means for you and coming back. And it's your line manager who needs to be that champion for you. They need to recognize, and it's not like I was disappointed. Well, I suppose where flexible working came out as one of the biggest barriers. Yes, flexible working is key, but it takes the line manager to make sure that that flexible working is implemented and used and encouraged and put into action. So whilst those policies need to be there, it is always the line manager. If you've got a line manager that understands and is supportive, you don't think twice about saying, sorry, excuse me, I've got to go and do this today. I'll make it up later, or I'll sort that out. And it's fine. But if you've got a line manager who doesn't understand, who doesn't have that recognition, or who always puts somebody else ahead of you, being able to say something is complicated, difficult, and potentially more stressful, puts that barrier and stops you asking for the support that you need. So I think it just comes down to educating and getting good line managers on board and having those conversations. Being able to have difficult conversations is what a line manager should do. So training.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Sarah. 3 minutes. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question before we wrap. Actually, I'm going to go to you, Joe. We've touched a number of times on the importance of a sponsor, line manager. What are your observations on male or female sponsors? What's working well? What are some of the challenges?
Yeah, it's a good question, Clive. I'm a big believer in that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. I think mentoring plays a really important role in supporting and building confidence in early careers for women. But sponsorship is action-oriented. I think mentoring can sometimes be quite passive in terms of providing advice and support. When we talk about sponsorship, we're talking about actively elevating women into leadership positions and having the onus on the sponsor to take accountability for that. And I think that's underdone. And I think more men should be doing this. When we say men are overrepresented in positions of leadership across our economies, we should be asking more men to be sponsoring women with accountability to elevate them into positions. I think it's too passive and too easy to say, we're doing mentoring and I'm having a monthly catch up and I'm having a coffee. Is that having an impact? Actually, let's get real. Let's get action oriented and let's get accountable around sponsorship. That's what's going to really make a shift.
Thanks very much, Joe. Well, unfortunately, we're in the last minute. That's all we've got time for today. But please don't forget to download a summary of the study's findings via the QR code on the screen or by heading to Chartered Accountants Worldwide website. Lastly, I want to say a huge thank you to all our speakers today, and thank you to our partners at Big Top Multimedia and A1 for bringing this event to life. See you the next time, everyone. Bye for now.